The rain wasn't falling so much as it was being hurled sideways by a Gulf Coast wind that smelled of salt and decay. My headlights carved two shaky tunnels through the gloom, the only light for miles on Highway 99. They call this stretch the Gray Coast. The maps show a road connecting tired fishing towns. The reality is something else, a liminal space of pine barrens and brackish water, where the sky presses down like a damp palm. I was Sergeant Eli Vance. 10 years with the county sheriff's office, and the last 4 of those have been spent on this midnight shift, a glorified watchman for ghosts and logging trucks. My patrol was a ritual of silence and caffeine. Check the abandoned pulp mill lot. Scan the bridges for jumpers who never materialized. Listen to the static hiss of the radio, waiting for a disturbance that rarely came. It was a Tuesday, the Tuesday after full moon. Not that it mattered. The cloud cover was total. My wipers beat a frantic, useless rhythm. That's when I saw her, at mile marker 17, where the road kinks to avoid a sinkhole lake. A figure stood on the gravel shoulder. No car, no broken-down vehicle, just a person, exposed to the elemental fury. My gut instinct, stranded motorist, clashed with a deeper, primal signal. Wrongness. I slowed, my spotlight cutting through the sheeting rain to pin her in its harsh white circle. A woman. She wore a bright yellow raincoat, the kind from a different era, with a bulky hood. She stood perfectly still, facing the road, not waving, not looking for help, just standing. Her posture wasn't one of distress. It was one of expectation. I parked 20 yards ahead, the ritual taking over. Unsnap, holster strap, shoulder check, step out into the drenching cold. Ma'am. My voice was swallowed by the wind. I approached, my boots crunching on wet stone. Do you need assistance? She turned her head slowly. The hood shadowed her face, but I caught the pale oval of her chin. Her hands were at her sides. She made no sound. Are you hurt? Is there a vehicle? I was closer now, within 10 feet. The details became unsettling. The raincoat was spotless, unrealistically bright against the mud-splattered ground. The rain didn't seem to beat on it. It sheeted off as if from glass. And her stillness, it was absolute, not the shivering rigidity of a cold, frightened person, but the stillness of a statue. Ma'am, I need you to speak to me. It's not safe out here. Her right arm lifted, not a wave, a deliberate, stiff motion. She extended her index finger, pointing north, down the black throat of Highway 99. The gesture was unnervingly precise. Pointing doesn't help me. Are you in trouble? Do you understand? My professional patience was wearing thin, layered over a growing layer of ice. This was veering into mental health crisis territory, the worst kind in the middle of nowhere. Protocol said bring her in for evaluation. Something deeper in me screamed to get back in the car and drive. After a full minute of one-sided dialogue, I made the decision. All right, I can't leave you here. You're coming with me to the substation in Port Sabine. Get out of this weather. I gestured toward my patrol SUV. To my surprise, she complied immediately, walking with smooth, soundless gait. She slid into the back seat without a word. I shut the door, the thunk final. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw her, sitting bolt upright, arm extended once more, that finger aimed like a compass needle through the windshield. Dispatch V24. I've got to tend to 91, female, nonverbal. Transporting to Port Sabine for welfare check. No backup needed. The dispatcher's acknowledgement was crackled with static. I put the SUV in drive, my eyes constantly flicking to the rear view. She was a painting, unmoving. The pointing was absurd, terrifying. My mind raced through possibilities. Catatonia, profound shock, a neurological event. But her eyes in the mirror, when I caught them, they weren't vacant. They held a terrifying focus, locked on a road ahead, as if following a script only she could see. We drove in that terrible silence for 8 minutes. The rain eased to a drizzle. Near mile marker 23, a glint of wrong color caught my eye. Not her yellow, but a flash of red submerged in the overflowing ditch that paralleled the road. I slowed. Brake lights. Submerged. My passenger's arm dropped. For the first time, she moved her head. She looked directly at me in the mirror and gave one slow, deliberate nod. Jesus. I hit the lights and swerved onto the shoulder. It wasn't a ditch. It was Wallace Creek, swollen over its banks, and a sedan was nose down in it, its trunk just above the rushing water. I was out, radioing for EMS and rescue, wading into the knee-deep, icy flow. The driver's side window was submerged. I hammered the glass with my flashlight until it webbed and gave way. The water rushing in, a woman, maybe in her 30s, was slumped against the seatbelt, unconscious, her face moments from being underwater. I cut the belt, hauled her out through the window, and dragged her to the bank. She coughed, spewing water, as the distant whine of sirens began to pierce the night. It was a clean save, textbook. As the paramedics took over, the adrenaline bled away, leaving a cold hollow. I remember my passenger. I turned back to my SUV, its interior dome light on. The back seat was empty. I stared, uncomprehending. The doors were still locked from the outside. I hadn't heard a thing. I opened the door. The seat was dry. Not a single drop of water from the storm. But on the center of the leather, a small object glinted. A child's hairpin, shaped like a butterfly, enameled in faded blue. One of the paramedics walked over as I stood there, pin in hand. "You okay, Sarge?" That was some quick thinking. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough. Lucky I saw the lights. The saved woman was on a gurney now, wrapped in a foil blanket. As they loaded her into the ambulance, she looked at me, her eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Then her gaze drifted past me to the creek, and a strange, haunted look came over her. My daughter, she loved this creek. She drowned here 5 years ago today. A cold that had nothing to do with the rain settled in my bones. I looked down at the butterfly hairpin in my palm. The paramedic nodded sympathetically. Tragedy. Her name was Lena. Cute kid. Always had these little butterflies in her hair. Sleep didn't come. I sat in my kitchen as dawn bleached the sky, the butterfly hairpin on the table before me like evidence from a crime I couldn't define. I'd filed my report, observed vehicle in distress, performed rescue. I omitted the woman in yellow. What would I say? Apprehended a non-corporeal navigation system. They'd hand me a psych eval and a desk duty slip. But the coincidence was a splinter in my mind. The date, the location, the hairpin. Logic war with feeling that was becoming certainty. I hadn't found that car. I'd been led to it. The next night, I was taut as a wire. Every shadow on the shoulder made my hands tighten on the wheel. Mile marker 17 was just a signpost in the dark, no yellow figure. I felt a ridiculous mix of relief and disappointment. But at marker 31 near the old sawmill, he was there, a man in faded denim overalls and a hard hat, standing like a sentry in the beam of my lights. The same stillness, the same silent, unwavering point, this time toward a dirt service road. The script repeated itself. The silent compliance. The tense drive. He led me to a massive longleaf pine, its roots undermined by recent rains, leaning precariously over the mill's deserted foreman shack. It was an immediate crisis, but come morning, the day crew would be there. As I stood assessing it, calling it a hazard, My passenger vanished from the locked car. This time, he left nothing behind but the faint scent of pine sap and sawdust. Night 3. A teenage girl in a varsity jacket at marker 12, pointing toward a cluster of shuttered vacation cottages. I found an old propane line, fractured and hissing, filling the basement of one cottage with odorless gas. A single spark from a rodent-chewed wire would have turned it into a fireball. Night 4. A pattern was no longer suspicion. It was an operational reality. They were guides. But to what end? They weren't ghosts in the haunting sense. They didn't moan or rattle chains. They were echoes, resonances of a tragic event, repeating their final, urgent need. And they were using me as their instrument. I couldn't breathe a word of this at the station, but I had to understand. My off hours became a solitary investigation. The county archives were housed in the basement of the Port Sabine Library, a tomb of microfiche and crumbling ledgers smelling of dust and mildew. I started with accident reports. The date the woman, Annette Riggs, went into the creek matched the anniversary of her daughter Lena's drowning, just as she'd said. I pulled a file on Lena Martel, 5 years old, lost near Wallace Creek, 1998. The mother's statement. The girl was wearing a yellow raincoat. A grainy photocopy of a missing poster showed a smiling child. In her hair, butterfly barrettes. My coffee went cold. The woman on the shoulder wasn't just at the location. She was a location. She was the victim. Hands trembling slightly, I cross-referenced the other sites. The sawmill at marker 31. An industrial accident, 1982. One Jeremiah Jeb Coulter, crushed by a felled tree that missed its skid path. He was a sawyer. He wore denim overalls and a hard hat. The vacation cottages at marker 12. A carbon monoxide poisoning, 1995. A high school senior, Chloe Benson, babysitting for a family that had left a generator running in an attached shed. She was found on the couch, wearing her varsity jacket. I sat back in the creaking library chair, the hum of the fluorescent lights suddenly loud. Each echo was a pin on a map, marking not just a place of death, but a moment where death was cheated. Lena's mother, Jeb's future co-workers, Chloe's potential renters. I wasn't just preventing accidents. I was fulfilling the unfinished business of the dead, their final act of warning to the living. But why now? Why me? Was I just the first person to look? To see? The pragmatist in me fought for a sane explanation. Subliminal awareness. Hypervigilance. Maybe I'd subconsciously noticed the gas smell or the tree's angle, and my brain concocted a hallucination to justify the hunch. But the hairpin, the lock car doors, the perfect dry seats. I spent days building timelines, my kitchen table buried in notes. The echoes spanned decades, but their appearances to me were clustered. There was no public pattern, no legend of the gray coast phantoms. It was a silent history, written in tragedy and now, somehow, being rewritten. On my 7th day in the archives, feeling the sting of futility, I gathered my papers to leave. Mrs. Peabody, the ancient librarian who had watched my obsession with silent curiosity, shuffled over as I packed. She didn't speak, simply placed a manila folder on the table in front of me. It wasn't from the county filing system. It was old, its edges furry with age. Found this misfiled in the local history section, she murmured, her voice like pages turning. Thought it might pertain to your research. She moved away before I could ask questions. I opened the folder. Inside was a single, curling black and white photograph. It showed a state trooper in a 1970s uniform, leaning against his cruiser. He wasn't smiling. He looked exhausted, haunted, his eyes staring at something beyond the camera. Written in faded blue ink on the back was Trooper Everett Finch. He saw them, too. 1974. Beneath the photo was a hand-drawn map of Highway 99, with excess marking locations. Several matched my own pins. At the bottom, in the same ink, a sentence that sent a jolt through me. They don't point to the past. They point to the pattern. And the pattern is hungry. The photograph of Everett Finch became a lodestone in my pocket, its weight disproportionate to its size. He saw them, too. The phrase was both a relief and a condemnation. Relief that I wasn't insane. Condemnation that this was a real thing, a duty that had been passed like a cursed baton. The map's warning, the pattern is hungry, gnawed at me. I'd assumed the echoes were benevolent, trapped souls seeking closure. What if they were something else? Bait on a hook? The echoes themselves began to change. It was subtle at first. The woman in yellow at marker 17 reappeared 2 nights after my library discovery, but her pointing finger trembled slightly. Her once placid face, when I dared glance in the rear view, was etched with silent urgency that bordered on anguish. She didn't lead me to a pending accident. She led me down a forgotten fire road that degenerated into a muddy track, my SUV groaning in protest. Her finger aimed at a stand of black gum trees. When I got out, flashlight in hand, I found nothing but swamp, and then my beam caught it. A patch of earth too neat, too rectangular. A recently blood froze, shallow grave. This wasn't prevention. Empty. This was a presentation. A message. See what waits? I radioed it in as a suspicious sight. The crime scene unit found traces of disturbed soil, tool marks, but no body, no evidence. It was just a hole in the ground. To them, a prank or a false alarm. To me, a direct and terrifying communication. The retired trooper, Everett Finch, was my only lead. Tracking him down was a lesson in fated lives. He left the patrol under vague circumstances, a medical retirement. His last known address was a P.O. box. It took calling in a favor with a pensions clerk to get a location, a rust-streaked single-wide trailer at the end of a dirt lane, deep in the scrub pine, miles from any road, let alone Highway 99, a place to hide from traffic, from lights, from shoulders where things could stand. He was old, not just in years but in spirit, hunched and weathered like a piece of driftwood. His eyes, when he finally opened the door after my third knock, were the same as in the photograph, haunted, seeing past me. He didn't seem surprised. "Vance," he rasped. It wasn't a question. Took you long enough to come. His trailer was a tomb of newspaper clippings, maps, and madness. Pages were pinned to the walls, connected by strings of colored yarn. It was my kitchen table obsession magnified into psychosis, but at its core was the same terrible geometry. He called them the unfinished. "They ain't ghosts, son," he said, sipping bitter coffee. "A ghost is a memory that won't fade. These are echoes. A sound gets trapped in a canyon. It'll bounce around for a while, repeating. A life gets torn away in a moment of pure fear, of desperate need. That scream can get trapped, too, in a place, in a road. They've been showing me how to save people," I said, defending the logic of my past weeks. Finch's laugh was a dry cough. "Saving? That's the sugar on the poison. They're tuning you, building trust, making you believe their only purpose is kindness." He stabbed a gnarled finger at a cluster of red excess on his main map. "You see a pattern of rescues. I see a pattern of attention. Every time you intervene, you're not just changing a future. You're acknowledging the past. You're feeding the pattern, making a connection between then and now stronger. Connection to what? The wound," he whispered, leaning closer. The smell of mildew and old man was overwhelming. The original tear, the violence or the negligence that first made the echo. It never really heals. Sometimes the wound tries to reopen, to repeat itself. They call that a convergence. The echoes don't point to past events, Vance. They point to future moments where the past is trying to happen again. You've been closing small cracks. But the big one, the original rupture, it's still there. And it's getting hungry. His words painted a new, horrific picture. I wasn't a savior. I was a repairman, fixing minor leaks while the central dam fissured. How do I stop it? The convergence. A profound exhaustion settled over him. You don't. You survive it. Or you don't. The echoes, when they cluster, when they start pointing not at places, but at a person, that's the sign. The convergence has chosen its focal point. The pattern is about to repeat in full, and it needs an actor, a living hand to wield the old knife. He met my eyes, and in his gaze was a lifetime of dread. When they point at you, boy, you run. You don't look back. I left his trailer feeling more burdened than before. His theory was insane. It had to be the product of a lonely mind stewing in tragedy for decades. That night, I tried to resume my normal patrol, to dismiss it all as stress and suggestion. I drove to Marker 17, half expecting, half dreading the yellow raincoat. She wasn't alone. All three of them stood in a line on the gravel. The woman in yellow, the Sawyer in denim, the teen in her varsity jacket. A silent, spectral tribunal. As my headlights washed over them, they moved in perfect, chilling unison, not a pointing gesture down the highway. In one fluid motion, all three raised their arms and extended their fingers directly at the windshield. At me, my heart seized. Finch's warning screamed in my head. When they point at you, you run. Before I could throw the SUV into reverse, my police radio crackled to life with dispatch. A routine call, breaking the spell. V24, respond to a 10 to 71, noise complaint. 77, Briarwood Lane. Resident reports possible trespassers. Code 2. My hands were slick on the wheel. I forced myself to look at the digital notepad. The address, Briarwood Lane. I knew that road. It was a private lane off Marker 19. And the parcel number, I'd seen it before. On the property deed for the wooded tract where I'd found the empty grave. The convergence wasn't just choosing me. It was giving me an invitation. The drive to Briarwood Lane was a study in surreal tension. The night was quiet now, the earlier rain gone, leaving a clean, cold blackness. The threefold pointing gesture replayed behind my eyes, a silent accusation. Run, Finch's voice urged. But I was a sheriff's sergeant responding to a call. Protocol was my armor, even if it felt paper-thin. 77 Briarwood was less a lane and more a long, rutted driveway tunneling through live oaks draped in Spanish moss. At its end sat a farmhouse that had slumped from quaint into dilapidation. A single porch light burned, a jaundiced eye in the darkness. No other houses in sight. The noise complaint was a transparent fiction, a lure. I knew it. The part of me that was still Eli Vance, badge number 714, had to play it straight. I called in my arrival, my voice steady despite the drumbeat in my chest. Stepping out, I took in the scene. An old pickup, its bed full of rusted tools and burlap sacks. A woodshed with a neat stack of split oak. The house itself had a watchful silence. I unclipped my holster strap but didn't draw, approaching the porch with deliberate, measured steps. The door opened before I could knock. The man who stood there was in his late 60s, lean and wiry, dressed in clean but worn flannel and jeans. He had the leathery, sun-weathered face of a lifelong outdoorsman. "Evening, officer," he said, his voice a gravelly drawl. "Appreciate you coming out. Name's Harlan Voss." His smile was there, but it didn't touch his eyes, which were the pale, flat blue of a winter sky. "Sergeant Vance. Got a call about a disturbance." "Yeah, probably nothing," Harlan said, stepping back to invite me in. The interior was a time capsule. Shag carpet, wood panel walls, the smell of wood smoke and fried food. Heard some thumping out in the old garage. Kids, maybe looking for trouble. I did know. This place is pretty isolated. As I made small talk, my cop's eyes cataloged the room. It was neat, almost obsessively so. But on a high shelf, a collection of items was displayed like trophies. Vintage license plates, mostly from the 70s and 80s. One, a Florida plate with a specific month sticker, made my breath catch. It matched the registration year of a car involved in one of the cold cases, a disappearance near Marker 12 in 1987. On the wall by the fireplace hung a set of well-kept woodworking tools. Among them was a long-handled hook knife, its curved blade polished to a dull shine. A tool mentioned in the coroner's notes on Jeb Coulter, the Sawyer, not as a weapon, but as a common tool at the mill. The coincidences stacked, forming a lattice of guilt. You do a lot of woodworking, Mr. Voss? Oh, a bit, he said, following my gaze. His smile tightened. Keeps the hands busy. You know how it is out here. Quiet. You have to make your own distractions. The word hung in the air. A log shifted in the fireplace with a sharp crack, making me start. Harlan's eyes flickered with something. Amusement? Anticipation? That's when I saw the first one. Not with my eyes, but in the periphery of my awareness. A shift in the dense shadow of the hallway leading to the back of the house. A cool draft that hadn't been there a second before. I didn't turn my head, but I knew. The woman in the yellow raincoat was standing there, a silent spectator to our conversation. My mouth went dry. Harlan was still talking, his words becoming a distant buzz. I saw the Sawyer, Jeb, materialize in the corner by an old roll-top desk, his hard hat casting an impossible shadow on the wall. Then Chloe, the teenager, leaning against the kitchen doorway, her varsity jacket a stark slash of color in the dim room. They were here, inside. Their presence wasn't for guidance. It was an audience, an indictment. Harlan stopped mid-sentence. He hadn't seen them, but he felt it, his head cocked, his eyes darting around the room. The affable mask slipped entirely, revealing a feral, paranoid alertness. You bring something in here with you? He hissed, his voice low and venomous. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. I kept my tone neutral, but my hand drifted closer to my sidearm. You know what I mean, he spat, taking a step back. The cold, the feeling. They're here, ain't they? You brought the spirits to my door. His rational neighbor facade was gone, replaced by the raw, superstitious fear of man who lived with ghosts he couldn't see but profoundly believed in. My acknowledgement of the past, my interventions, had stirred the nest, and the hornets were swarming him. He moved with shocking speed, his hand snatching the hook knife from the wall. The action broke the surreal standoff into pure, violent clarity. Harlan dropped the tool. I barked, drawing my service weapon. He didn't listen. With a guttural roar, fueled by decades of suppressed panic and guilt, he lunged. I sidestepped, deflecting his arm, but the blade grazed my ribs, a hot line of fire. We crashed into the heavy oak table. The echoes didn't move, but their forms seemed to intensify, their silent stares pouring weight into the room. I was fighting a man possessed by the very history I'd unearthed. He was strong, driven by madness. We wrestled across the floor, overturning a lamp. I lost my grip on my gun, sent it skittering under a couch. His hands, one still gripping the knife, found my throat. The world began to tunnel, dark spots dancing at the edges of my vision. His face above me was a rictus of terrified rage. You don't understand. They needed quiet. They needed to stay in the ground. As my consciousness flickered, the three echoes moved, not physically, but their silent, collective were focused. The woman in yellow let her hood fall back, revealing for the first time the face of a child, Lena, superimposed over her mother's grief. The Sawyer raised his arms as if felling a tree. The teenager opened her mouth in a soundless scream. Their combined, silent anguish became a tangible pressure in the room. Harlan screamed, a raw, animal sound of terror. He jerked his head as if slapped, his grip on my throat loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all I needed. I drove my knee up, bucked him off, and rolled, pinning him. A frantic struggle for the knife ended with my hand on his wrist, slamming it against the floor until his fingers sprang open. I cuffed him, breathing in ragged, painful gulps. He lay beneath me, sobbing now, not in fear of me, but the invisible presences crowding his home. "Make them go away," he whimpered. "Please, make them leave." As I stood, retrieving my weapon, the echoes began to fade. The woman in yellow was the last to go. But before she vanished completely, she turned. She wasn't looking at me or at Harlan. Her arm rose, not in a point, but in a slow, deliberate indication. Her finger was aimed at a door I hadn't noticed before, set under the staircase. A heavy, padlocked root cellar door. The sound of the sirens approaching Briarwood Lane was the sound of the real world crashing back in. Backup and EMS found me standing over a sobbing, compliant Harlan Voss, my uniform torn, a shallow but bloody cut along my ribs. The story I gave was a patchwork of truth. A disturbed individual, a violent response to a welfare check, a struggle. I mentioned the suspicious tools and plates, suggesting a possible link to old cases. I never uttered a word about silent passengers or pointing fingers. The padlocked cellar door changed everything. With Harlan in custody, we got a warrant. The lock gave way with a screech of rust. The smell that billowed out was not of damp earth, but of old chemicals, mildew, and something profoundly wrong. Flashlights revealed not a root cellar, but a shrine to predation. Shelves held clear plastic boxes. Inside were not preserves, but personal effects. A woman's wristwatch, a class ring from 1995, a child's sneaker, a set of butterfly hairpins identical to the one in my pocket. A workbench held tools for forging license plates and grinding down vehicle identification numbers. In a rusted footlocker, we found his grandfather's journals, meticulous, proud accounts of roadside abductions along Highway 99 in the 70s and 80s. Harlan hadn't just inherited the land. He'd inherited the sickness, curating the legacy, and the evidence suggested adding to it when the hunger struck. The case exploded. The Gray Coast Killer, the headline screamed. Forensic teams descended on the property, turning over soil, dragging the nearby ponds. The cold case files on my kitchen table became the center of a major task force. I was lauded as a dogged sergeant whose routine call uncovered a nightmare. There was a commendation, a promotion a detective offered. I took the promotion. It was the only way to stay close to the case, to control the narrative, to ensure the official story, a brilliant hunch based on solid police work, remained set in stone. But the toll was internal and exacting. The commendation felt like a lie. The echoes had done the work. I'd just been the vessel. I'd wake in the night. The feel of that hook knife's graze a phantom burn. The image of those three silent figures in Harlan's living room etched behind my eyelids. I saw a department psychologist, gave the required answers about stress and adrenaline dumps. My marriage, already strained by the odd hours of my secret obsession, couldn't withstand this new, unshareable chasm. We parted with a quiet sadness. She thought the job had broken me. In a way, she was right. It just wasn't a job she knew. Years bled into one another. Detective Vance. I worked other cases, good ones, putting real criminals away. But Highway 99 was always there, a silent partner in my mind. I heard that Everett Finch had passed away in his trailer, alone. I drove out there one afternoon. The county had cleared the trailer, but a single sealed box was left with a neighbor for me. Inside were his maps, his notes, decades of terrified, meticulous observation. On top lay a simple, handwritten note on a scrap of paper. The road doesn't forget. Someone has to listen. It's your turn. I kept the box. I didn't add to it. I tried to move on, to let the echoes rest. I told myself the convergence was over. Harlan was in a supermax, his pattern broken forever. The wound was closed. Then, on a rainy autumn night 5 years later, a call came to my desk. A young deputy, fresh-faced and eager, named Rivera. He'd been on a late patrol on 99. He'd found one of our units parked at mile marker 17, engine running, the officer inside catatonic, just staring ahead, mumbling. What was he mumbling, Rivera? I asked, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The deputy hesitated. It was weird, sir. He just kept saying, he's back. The pointing man is back. And he's angry. He said you miss one. The floor seemed to tilt. You miss one. Finch's warning about the wound, the original rupture. Harlan's grandfather had a partner. The journals hinted at it obliquely, a silent friend who helped dispose of vehicles. We'd never found him. The task force had assumed he was long dead. We reopened everything. With the cold detachment of age and hindsight, I re-examined every file, every evidence log from the Voss property. There was a name, a retired deputy from a neighboring county who had been first on the scene for at least 2 of the original disappearances. William Bill Garnett. He'd even been one of the first responders to my call of Harlan's. He'd stood in that living room, seen the cellar door. We brought him in. He was 78, a pillar of his church with grandchildren. His basement was a museum of stolen lives. Trophies from victims spanning 40 years, hidden behind a false wall. He confessed calmly. He'd been the scout, the cleaner. He'd watched me that night at Harlan's, realized the past was rising, and had gone aground, ceasing all activity. The catatonic trooper at marker 17, Garnett had been testing, seeing if the connection was still active, seeing if the new listener was paying attention. It was a final, grim footnote. Justice, delayed by decades, was served. The true, horrifying scale was finally known. After Garnett's sentencing, I drove to marker 17 one last time. I didn't get out. I just sat there as the sun dipped below the pines. In the gathering dusk, I saw him. Arthur, the man in the suit, my first and most constant guide. He wasn't alone. Faintly around him, I saw the others. The woman in yellow, the Sawyer, the teen, and scores more, a gentle constellation of lost souls. He looked at me, and for the first time, his expression held something like peace. He gave a single, slow nod of thanks, of release. Then, one by one, like lights winking out, they faded. Their work was done. The unfinished was finally complete. But as the last gleam of them vanished, my headlights, which had clicked on automatically, caught a new figure further down the shoulder. A young man in modern jeans and a hoodie, his form faint, shimmering. He raised his arm and pointed east, down the darkening highway. Then he was gone. The message was not one of closure, but of continuity. The road never forgets. New tragedies etch new echoes. The position of listener wasn't a temporary assignment. It was a duty. As long as there were dark roads and lonely souls, both living and dead, there would be a need for someone to see, to bridge the gap, to translate the silent warnings of the past into actions that safeguard the future. I put the car in drive and pulled onto the asphalt. I didn't speed toward the new pointing finger. I drove the speed limit, my detective's mind already shifting, preparing. The sirens of my old life had faded, but the whispers remained, and I had learned, above all else, how to listen if you've made it this far, listen to every twist and turn on this dark stretch of highway, then I owe you my sincere thanks. You've just journeyed through nearly 6,000 words of mystery, memory, and the thin veil between our world and the next. That's an investment of your time and attention I don't take lightly. This story, The Echo Road, was born from a simple, haunting question. What if the past isn't just a record, but a live wire, sparking warnings into the present? I'm so glad you chose to ride along with Detective Vance to find the answer. Now, I have to ask for your help. This channel, Winds of Thought, is built on bringing you these deep, immersive, and meticulously crafted narratives. We don't just skim the surface of creepy tales. We dive into their psychology, their structure, and the human truth at their core. But to keep doing this, to keep the lights on and the stories coming, we need you to become an active part of this community. It takes less than a second, but it makes all the difference. First, please hit the like button. That single click is the most direct signal to the algorithm that you want more content like this. It tells YouTube the story is worth sharing. Push it to others who crave thoughtful, long-form mysteries. It's the fuel for our journey. Second, and this is crucial, make sure you're subscribed to Winds of Thought. We are just getting started. The road has many more miles. Subscribing is your free ticket for what's coming next. Perhaps a story about the whispers in a forgotten asylum's hydrotherapy ward, or the unsolved codes left behind by a lighthouse keeper who vanished in plain sight. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a departure into the unexplained. Finally, and this is my favorite part, I want to hear from you. The conversation doesn't end when the video does. Down in the comments, tell me, what road would you never dare to drive alone at night, and why? Is there a local stretch near you with a dark legend? Or perhaps you've had your own fleeting, unexplained experience, a glimpse of something on the shoulder, a feeling of being watched by the landscape itself. Share your story. This is where our community comes alive, comparing notes from all corners of the map. Remember, the core of The Echo Road isn't about ghosts. It's about attention. It's about the choice to listen to the whispers of history and place, and in doing so, altering the future. By liking, subscribing, and commenting, you're doing exactly that. You're paying attention. You're telling me these stories matter. You're ensuring that Winds of Thought continues to be a place where we can explore the shadowy corners of experience together, with respect for mystery and a dedication to the tale. Thank you for your time, your trust, and your listening ear. Stay curious, and I'll see you on the next journey. Until then, drive safe, and maybe, just maybe, pay a little extra attention to who or what might be standing on the shoulder, waiting to be seen.